Corp, 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 corp.
Hello everyone, this is Cash Ketchum here with my first official video. Just wanted to get started and welcome y'all to the channel. Glad to get started here. I'm super excited to be a part of both the Pokemon and Shiny Hunting community, and I'm super appreciative of anyone that wants to kind of take a look and is interested in any of my content. I'm blessed to be here, and I hope y'all enjoy the coming videos. And to get started into this first video, it's a doozy, guys. We're going to be getting into, if you haven't already seen the title, potentially the rarest and most difficult shiny Pokemon in all of Pokemon's history. This is the world's first legitimate American Pokemon box shiny surfing Pichu. Alright, so to get started, let's talk about Pokemon Box Ruby and Sapphire. What in the heck is Pokemon Box? Is that like PC Box? Well, if you guessed that, you'd be just about spot on, because that's pretty much exactly what it is. Pokemon Box Ruby and Sapphire is a game originally released in Japan in 2003. With that, all it was an extension of the PC boxes for those cartridges, for those games, on the GameCube. That's it. It could also do some emulation for some of the games such as Ruby and Sapphire, and that's really it. You can play that on the GameCube. And that's it. I'm not BSing you here. That's all they had going for them. So, as you can imagine, wasn't really the hottest item in 2004. No one really gave a crap. And because of that, that actually ended up making it one of the rarest video games, period. Now, the PAL version and Japanese version had a much wider distribution span, a little more popular, a little more positively received, and had a little more access to both the community and social media at the time, which was obviously very limited in 2003 and 2004. But more people knew about this thing's existence in the first place. In America, however, they only had this for the Pokemon Center in New York, as well as the online Pokemon Center. So, that being said, no one really had access to it. There was less than 1,000 copies distributed total for the American version. Hence it only going to the Pokemon Center in New York, the single Pokemon Center that was ever in America, which is now gone, mind you. Don't even want to get started on that depressing topic, but there was only honestly a very, very small amount of these copies ever made. And so, very, very few people have this game, let alone in a nice copy. If you take a look at eBay, you'll find some copies more than likely in nice packaging, so in the original boxes, but going for in the 4 figures, even if they're ungraded. We're talking about the American one, not the obviously much more easily accessible and more common PAL or Japanese version. The American Pokemon box, which I will show you has clear differentiations, one is PAL, one is not, is much more rare. And so that's why something like this was so interesting to me, because when I stumbled upon it, I just happened to find it in a game store. I walked into this classic game store back when I was based in New Mexico in the military, and as a joke, I walked up to the guy, tapped my hand on the counter there, and I said, hey you, my guy, come on over. What is the most expensive game you got here? I'll buy it right now. He looks at me and goes, well, you're in luck. We just got a Pokemon game. And I immediately stopped and go, Pokemon? Your most rare and expensive game is a Pokemon game? What is it going to be, a sealed emerald for like $80? Come on, my guy. Then he shows me this monstrosity, Pokemon Box Ruby and Sapphire, the American version. He gives me the whole history behind it. And I am blown away. But I'm also interested.
Very interested.
And so I get very, very enamored by this thing, and so I end up buying it, of course, because I'm insane. And after going over some of the details of it, I become even more enamored, because I find out you're actually able to get some prizes from these. So with some of these eggs that you actually get for playing Pokemon Box, really the only incentive for getting the game in the first place, first one right off the bat, what you get when you start the game, you start a new file, right? You're going to get a Swablu. That's it. Awesome. If you do actually input 100 Pokemon into this game, you're then going to get an egg that can hatch a Zigzagoon, but this time with extreme speed, which is actually pretty meta viable as a Linu if you evolve it. So a lot of people actually thought this was a really interesting incentive, and only 100 Pokemon, that's not too insane. That's like 3 or 4 boxes full of Pokemon. I could totally do that. But then it gets a little more crazy. 5 times that amount, 500 Pokemon input into Pokemon box from one save file, mind you, will get a Skitty that knows Payday. Okay, can get a Meowth that knows that, but cool, that's fine, Skitty, whatever. But then this is where it gets truly insane, which is what really caught my attention. 1,499 Pokemon, 1,500 total, but obviously need space for that egg in the box, will elicit you a Pichu, but not just any Pichu, guys, or else we wouldn't be making this video. A Pichu that knows Surf. Even though you can get a Pikachu, that's obviously objectively far better and more interesting and well-liked. A Pichu with Surf. That's your prize. For literally putting in weeks and probably months of time of manually catching and then inputting 1,500 Pokemon. Like, I think we need to go over that math here. 500 is insane, but 3 times that amount means you're going to need to fill every box in the PC in your same game file manually almost 4 times over. Can we just think about that? Do you know how long that would actually take a kid back in the day in 2003, 2004 without access to Game Sharks? Obviously we're talking about this whole hunt has been legit, so you know I'm not going to be using Game Sharks. But that is absolutely insane to me. And that's what you get. A Pichu that knows Surf. And you know what? Say no more. I'm interested. Shut up and take my money. So, ladies and gentlemen, you're probably asking me, what in the hell is wrong with you? Why would you ever put yourself through this? What's the point of all this? What do you get? And you know what? Y'all should be ashamed of yourself. Because what have we, as Pokemon players, always been taught? To be the very best like no one ever was. And if you're shiny hunting, if you ain't first, you're last, my guys and girls. So for me, I said, how am I supposed to be the very best like no one ever was? And it was quite obvious. If I'm into shiny hunting, I need to get a shiny that no one had ever even thought was possible. Had even attempted. The first one in the world. I gotta be the world's first. Gotta be the very best like no one ever was, right? So then I went straight to the Safari Zone. I go, no one is a crazy enough mad lad to be shiny hunting purposefully in the Safari Zone. And then we started seeing Safari Week. And then, because of that, more people started getting shiny Scythers, shiny Chanseys, shiny Tauruses, shiny Kangas, and I couldn't compete. I just couldn't compete. For Christ's sake, I got
12 Game Boys.
got a whole frame portable Game Boy station to be set up that I could play these 12 Game Boys like I'm a freaking piano player. And I still couldn't beat these guys. They were smacking me around, right? And I could not keep up with them. So then it dawned on me, I need to figure out a way to surpass these guys. I tried to get into shiny Beldum in Safari Zone. And people thought that was
Straight up mean.
there's almost no chance of catching that thing. But then I realized over time, once different methodologies started coming out, and the fact there was a 100% encounter rate if you magnet pull and whatnot, over time, eventually you'll get it after a few months to a few years. And a few years is nothing to me. I could throw away a few years for a shiny Pokemon. I'll do it. Just watch me. But it wasn't crazy enough. And that's when I found out about Pokemon Box. And as I said, it was an incredibly rare game. When I found out about the asininity of getting this Pichu, well then I thought, is it possible to get it shiny? And it turns out, it is. No one had ever done it, and it's all in theory, according to anything that's able to be found on any shiny hunting forums or on the internet. But theoretically it's possible. It's very similar to the Manaphy hunt. If you're not familiar with the Manaphy hunt, the Pokemon Ranger Manaphy, all you have to do is once you are able to get the Manaphy egg after beating a save file, what you can do is then trade the egg over, trade it to another save file from there, hatch it. If it's not shiny, create a new save file on a separate cartridge, trade that over after it's reverted back to an egg, and then hopefully that trainer in Secret ID trainer ID and secret ID can actually correspond to a shiny, and then rinse and repeat for the next few months until you get it. In a similar way, that's exactly how this Pichu works. Alright everyone, time to get into the big boy concepts here. So let's put on our big brain caps, take off the dunce caps for a little bit. We're going to be getting into the meat and bones of this video, where it really starts to get complicated and really interesting. What exactly is ACE, or arbitrary code execution? What exactly is glitzer popping, encoding, and hexadecimals? Well, to start off with, ACE is a glitch present in most games in general, but in context of Pokemon, it's manually running codes in means in which would normally elicit a different response. And what that means is we're going to be using ROM and RAM and essentially mixing up the coding that represents both those. Going a little further into it, we can get into something called glitzer popping, which is something you heard me refer to in the beginning of the video, years back. And so with glitzer popping, all that is a subset of some of the other more common glitches, such as the POMEG glitch, which a lot more people are familiar with, or a big part of the ACE method, which is essentially just a subset of arbitrary code execution. And so glitzer pop is essentially glitching a Pokemon to create either an item or a set of values corresponding to that Pokemon that it didn't have before. And how we can do that and how we can control that is understanding corruption types. And what a corruption type comes from is just like how IVs, shininess, etc. are all preset when the Pokemon is randomly generated, so is the corruption type. And essentially what a corruption type refers to is any of the 12 types, when they are corrupted in a certain way, what happens is that certain values and aspects of the Pokemon are swapped. And once you understand how it's being swapped, you know what you can set it to and what the end results are going to be. Well, some of you may be wondering, what exactly is a corruption? Well, corruption is exactly what it sounds like. In this case, a Pokemon transforming into a different species or something with a different value to it. And typically what you're going to see during an improper corruption is a bad egg. If anyone's ever glitched or done any of these goofy glitches, anything of the like, what you're going to see is a bad egg, because the game does not have a proper placeholder for something that is corrupted improperly. So the developers knew if this were to happen, something needs to hold that place value. And so what happens is then a bad egg is formed, and it literally says in the name, bad egg. Usually if you send it into battle or if it has its glitch moves, the game will freeze. The game doesn't really know and how to access the memory associated with that placeholder. Now, if it's properly corrupted, that's all based off, like I said, its corruption type. And so, how to properly corrupt a Pokemon, in layman's terms, is you're going to need initiators. I don't want to get too detailed into what initiators go where and how to do it, as you can just follow the links if you truly are interested to get more context and information on that. But let's just say you need certain Pokemon next to the proper ones you wish to corrupt, so the game can understand and access memory from its following placeholder. Well, some of y'all are probably wondering, why in the heck do we need to know all this? Why did you have to go through this whole spiel if you're just trying to get a shining surfing Pichu, and you already said that you can akin that whole hunt to a Ranger Manaphy? Plenty of people have done that on YouTube without having to do any glitches and whatnot, so why is your Pichu any different? It might be a little more difficult to amass all those Pokemon to then manually transfer into Pokemon Box to get one single egg, but why should it be any different? And I'll tell you why, guys. Because we're not just stopping at getting a shiny surfing Pichu. My goal was to get a shiny surfing Pichu with every ribbon. And what that means is, if y'all aren't familiar, there are ribbons you can get after Generation 3, technically after Pokemon Coliseum, but you get all these ribbons and you can amass every single ribbon, every single generation. You now have a Ribbon Master. And what a lot of people don't realize is, well, once again, why do you need all these glitches? Well, once again, I'll let you know, there are some ribbons that aren't normally accessible. Specifically, the World Ribbon. So if we're going to need to get all the ribbons, including this World Ribbon, which technically cannot be gained anymore, what you're going to need to now do is utilize that concept I was discussing before, glitzer popping. And as I said, that's going to elicit some values and aspects of the Pokemon that it wouldn't normally have, based on swapping some coding that's inherent to both the corruption type and the Pokemon itself. So what we now have to do is find a Pichu, not just that can be shiny, but that is also going to be type 2, which is a specific corruption type that's going to elicit the results we need. So now I'm not just trying to amass 5 eggs. No, I need to now amass 5 eggs of Pichus that are also going to be able to have that corruption type and be corruptible, which those odds are 1 in 12. So hitting just the average, I'm going to need to do that 60 times, 60 different eggs, and maybe I'll get 5 that will get the results we need and be able to get all the ribbons from each generation, including the very rare ribbons. So now there's just no way I can do that 60 times with the current methods that we have for naturally cloning or getting as much Pokemon as possible to then get the Pichu. As I talked about before, we need 1,500. I don't have enough hours in my lifetime to do that naturally, which is where we now have to figure out a new method. So this is where we start to get really into the breakdown of the madness here. So I needed to figure out a way that I was going to then get the most amount of Pichus I could in the quickest time possible. So we started doing a lot of trials and errors. I found an incredibly intelligent and very helpful guy that explained to me the whole process behind Ace and Glitzer popping and all these things that could hopefully help me get to the end of my goal. And so what we needed to do for that is, after going over the details for Pokemon Box, in order to actually be able to clone Pokemon, we first have to go, well, what games can I use to clone Pokemon? Emerald is one of the only games that has the more commonly known glitch for them. Duplicate that, repeat process until you got 1,500 Pokemon. That takes hours, my guys. Absolute asininity. Not gonna do that. Takes far too long. So let's take a look at our other options here. After doing some research, there are some really weird side effects to these glitches, if you could imagine. One of them is actually something known as the fast cloning glitch Deca. And Deca is going to refer to a Pokemon that is glitched and corrupted in a certain way, but does not have a proper placeholder for its species. So all it's going to have is a Deca mark, or a question mark, better known as. And so if you scroll over that in the PC, what's going to happen is if you then click a Pokemon, get rid of whatever random blank bad egg that I grabbed off of it, then re-grab it, what it's going to then do is have a clone of that Pokemon. Repeat this process over and over and over again, and guess what's going to happen? You can now clone boxes full of Pokemon in a matter of minutes. So, with that being said, a lot of my problems solved. If I can just do this to a game, any new save file, well then guess what? I can just send those 1,500 Pokemon into a new save file for Pokemon Box, go ahead, get the Pichu, rinse and repeat until I have 5 proper corruption type Pichus. But here's the thing. Pokemon Box requires you to have a new save file every single time, similar to Pokemon Ranger. Now, I don't have to get a whole new CD, I just need a whole new save file and memory card that is wiped. So what I then have to do is figure out how the heck am I supposed to get these fast cloning Decas and all these setups for this corruption on a whole new save file every single time. And that's where we get into the madness here. After many weeks of deliberating and figuring out all the restrictions on trading eggs and trading Decas and game freezing based on what corruption types you have and what the placeholders are, all the little niche aspects and details of these glitch Pokemon that no one had ever thought of going over, because who needed to know for this particular hunt, we came to figure out the fastest method was as follows. Play through a new save file as fast as you can. Once you're able to get Pokeballs, you're going to catch 5 Pokemon. From here, what you're going to do is, on your other save file, already have preset trained corruption types, in this case C-Dot, with certain items, for example Master Balls. Trade over those 5 C-Dot for those 5 Pokemon you just caught in the new file, Then from there, use those Master Balls to expedite the process, catching 5 more Pokemon, to then trade for 5 more Corruption Initiators that are now going to be helping corrupt that C-Dot property that was trained, in sequence to each other 5 times, and then trade over some more Pokemon for certain items you need, such as Pomeg Berries, the Deca that you're actually going to need to eventually do the fast trading, and then a bike just to expedite the hatching process. From there, you're going to double corrupt using the Pomeg glitch, which, without me wasting more of your time, you can simply follow the link that I put in the description below, which involves essentially having a fainted Pokemon in your party using a Pomeg Berry that lowers your HP. And then from there, you're going to then, hopefully, after many times, 1 in 32 is your chance to have a proper corruption. It's going to turn into a proper egg, grab that egg, put it into your party, hatch it, and what that's going to do is, based on the description I gave y'all for Ace, what that's going to do is then actually warp you straight to the credits. But from there, once you are done with the credits, you come down, and then what you're going to do is then go straight back up to the upper town. You're going to then trade over, now that you're able to trade over eggs since you have completed the game, trade over some more of the corrupted eggs, use that same process to then hatch that corrupted egg. You're going to warp now to Mauville, which then you can take all the bad eggs and glitch Pokemon, put them in the daycare and or delete them, because once you're now able to transfer Pokemon, Pokemon Box will not let you even connect to it if you have any bad eggs or glitch Pokemon in your PC or party. So once that's all done, you can expedite the process by doing the fast cloning as I described before, and then from there, take all those Pokemon, put them into Pokemon Box, and there you go. You got a Pichu. Hopefully it's going to have the right corruption type, and then rinse and repeat until you have 5. So now that we've actually gotten the proper eggs, now comes the easiest part. Shiny hunting. This absolute monstrosity. As far as the shiny hunting process goes for this now, that we have the 5 eggs, this can, as I said before, be akin to the Ranger Manaphy hunt, which is also known as one of the worst, if not the worst, hunting methods there is, period. And so what that involves is, if anyone's not familiar, that is, once you have the proper amount of eggs that you feel as if you can amass and hunt with, what you're going to do then is, on one save file, running through the game until you're able to catch Pokemon and trade, while on another console, with your other hand I'm assuming, you are now playing through that game and trying to hatch the eggs, and if they aren't shiny, you simply revert back to the original save, and then once you are able to trade from the other save file, you then trade those eggs to that new save file, and then rinse and repeat until the end of your days. Now, this Pichu is very similar in that you essentially do the same thing but just on a 3rd gen game, and the issue with the 3rd gen is that before Emerald, you weren't able to expedite this process by hatching them with a Pokemon with magma armor in the front of your party, right? That was introduced in Emerald and beyond. And so if you're doing this Ruby and Sapphire, which you are essentially only allowed to do if you are keeping within the parameters I gave, since Emerald isn't able to transfer into Pokemon Box in the same manner per a new save file, you now have to make this process even longer. And so once you actually have those 5 eggs, the shiny hunting process is just completely ridiculous. And once you actually do get a shiny, that's only step 1. Something that is unique to Pichu in general is that once you do get the shiny, the next step, as I said, is to now make it corrupted to where it can now be viable to get the very rare ribbon like the World Ribbon, and continue getting on the rest of the ribbons in the next generations to be a proper ribbon master, which was obviously one of our main goals. But once this is corrupted, there is an issue. Any corrupted Pokemon tends to have, usually based on the corruption type, which of course this particular corruption type that this Pichu needs to be, will elicit this result in that you will have glitch moves that will also not be able to be battled with, nor will you be able to transfer it up into later gens. The game literally freezes. So, because of that, we need to figure out a way to get its moves back. But here's the thing. Pichu itself, if we are trying to keep it a Pichu, which is obviously the main goal, it only learns a certain amount of moves, and not enough moves to get rid of all the glitch moves, as all 4 possible moves are glitched, and if there's only one glitch move, what's going to happen is that the whole game is going to freeze. So if you got one, you're screwed. So what we have to now do is figure out a whole new glitch to where it can now learn moves that are going to completely take away these glitch moves. And so what we have to now do is actually give it so much EXP that it can actually revert to level 0. This is an actual thing, the EXP overflow glitch. And then you can actually keep it in the daycare to then relearn its moves, hopefully getting rid of all of the glitch moves as it learns them naturally, which is what happens in the daycare over time. Now, to get into the details of the EXP overflow glitch would be a whole nother video in itself, as most of these methods would be. But if you are really interested, you can simply reference the link below in the descriptions I'll provide for you if you really are that curious about it. But a general summary would just be essentially glitching the game to where you're going into the pyramid in the Battle Frontier while you're also in the Safari Zone at the same time, and using a bunch of glitch items from a bunch of double corrupted Pokemon that you can't even see, that are really invisible. You are then putting it in the bag and glitching the game so hard that apparently when you do a certain method, you then get so much XP for whatever Pokemon is in your daycare that it levels past 100 and up to 0, which then we can then relearn some of its moves naturally by being in the daycare after that process is done. So now that I've kind of given y'all a honestly quick run over, pretty concise run over of all of the ridiculousness that comes with this hunt, y'all are probably thinking, well, is it worth it? Are you sure this is the rarest possible shiny? And as I've said, after scouring all of the shiny hunting forums I could find, all of the event distributions that were possible to be shiny, this currently is the only one, as far as I could find, that has never been shown as being acquired legitimately. Now, when I say legitimately, I'm more referring to without using, obviously, external cheating devices or RNG. Now, if you do use RNG, that's perfectly fine. I'm not taking away anything from that. I'm just saying, if it isn't full odds, then I wouldn't consider it legitimate for the purposes of my video or challenge. So, we're talking about even the event distribution eggs, right, that were in very, very limited amounts distributed in countries that most people wouldn't have access to, like in South Korea or certain prefectures in Japan. Those, if they did have the chance to be shiny, were either heightened shiny odds or were able to get shiny in the same process as trading the egg to a different save file, hatching it, and then repeating the same process of both this Manaphy and the Pichu. And so the only issue with that is a lot of people were able to backlog and back up save files that had those eggs. And so now you're able to get those eggs as you see fit. And we need to keep it in 3rd gen, as all these corruption types don't really matter for anything above Gen 3, because that's not something that's even possible in those later gens, nor is it viable to becoming a full Ribbon Master without it. Now, as I said, even though I did the research I did, I would love to hear y'all's perspective on what might be more rare or difficult, as those are obviously subjective terms. But as y'all probably could have guessed, since I am here making this video in the first place, it has been finally done. Without using any external cheating devices, completely in-game, and with no RNG or manipulation to alter odds or the like, the first documented American Pokemon box shiny Surfing Pichu has been found. And on top of that, it is also meta viable, because we got the one in around 200 odds of it actually having 0 speed IVs, which, if y'all aren't familiar with the meta system, can be used for trick room setups and weakness policy, since it knows Surf. This is just absolutely insane, and I'm so glad to finally be here. And so now comes the next videos of getting through every generation and getting every ribbon possible. And so I just want to say thank y'all for being here and listening to this absolutely hilarious process of getting the most absolutely hilarious shiny Pokemon. And I hope y'all were as invested as I was, even a %. And I'm so glad y'all stuck through if you have till the end. And I'm glad that y'all will hopefully be here for the rest of these videos and the rest of this documentary. And I'll hopefully see you in the next video. So today, we're going to be going on an adventure. If you're here from the last video, you know that I was recently able to acquire the first documented, legitimate, non-RNG, shiny American Pokemon box surfing Pichu. I know, quite the mouthful. Now, while the last video gave an in-depth explanation of the process and context behind that hunt, I thought we could get into something slightly more interesting and less educational, if you can even call my last video that. Now with this video, I plan on documenting the next step in this adventure, trying to make this Pichu the most ridiculous Pokemon in history.
Wrong.
And that step would be for it to be something called a Ribbon Master. If any of y'all are not familiar with ribbons, these are essentially just in-game rewards for accomplishing a particular task in the Pokemon games. These tasks vary from winning the Pokemon League to simply maxing out your Pokemon's happiness and everything in between. My goal for this video was to see if it is actually possible to do all the ribbon challenges using this Pichu, adorning it with every ribbon from every generation throughout all the Pokemon games along the way. There's actually a very interesting subreddit specifically for those interested in this goal called r/Pokemon Ribbons. I would definitely recommend taking a look. They're all very helpful, very accommodating community, always there to answer any questions you guys may have. So definitely recommend taking a look and, giving them some time. With all that being said, let's see just how doable this challenge is for a novice trainer like myself and a baby Pokemon to accomplish. The first ribbons we're going to be going over are the ribbons in the original generation that ribbons were introduced, which would be the 3rd generation. Now, this does actually include the secondary/spin-off games from the OR region, which would be Pokemon Coliseum and Pokemon XD Gale of Darkness. But those can kind of come at a little later point. We're going to go over the Hoenn region first and foremost, since that is one people are obviously more familiar with and, generally speaking, a lot more difficult. Just as a preemptive note before we get into the rest of this video, the main thing here is that luckily we didn't have to actually have Pichu in every single battle and in every single instance in order to complete the ribbon challenge or for him to get the ribbon. He had to be there, usually in the context of something like the Battle Tower or Battle Mason, whatever it is, depending on the corresponding generation. He just had to be there for the last battle or the last set of battles. So from 49th and up, or the 42nd to the 49th, or the 50th usually would be where he'd have to be. So wasn't too hard on myself here. Don't want anyone to get confused. Pichu was not in every single battle, but he was a big part of the final battles or just kind of tagging along, backpacking. But when it came to the contest, things of the like, he was obviously the one that had to participate fully in those to get those ribbons. There are a number of ribbons you can get for each generation, mostly. These are going to consist mainly of performing and winning in contests, winning streaks in the Battle Tower, etc. Since we're obviously having to start in chronological order, we're going to be starting off in Pichu's home region, Hoenn, in the 3rd gen. This region and generation actually has the most amount of ribbons total to acquire. Most of these are just each individual rank in the contests, with some Battle Tower and extraneous ribbons following those. Obviously, these ribbons are going to vary in difficulty, especially within the context of this challenge, since we are trying to get this Pichu every single ribbon. So obviously something like the Battle Tower or anything to do with battling really is going to be a little more challenging than something like simply talking to a lady on a certain day of the week to get a ribbon with Pichu just the first member in our party. This means we're going to have to make a team so effective and so OP in nearly every battle instance that it completely overshadows how Pichu really is. With all that being said, we're also going to make sure to adhere to certain rules. We're going to make sure, obviously, just like the previous video, in the process of getting Pichu, that absolutely no cheating devices, no external hardware, no hacking, no RNG, nothing like that is being used to make these challenges any easier. So that means we're not going to be, glitching or using an external software to create perfect Pokemon for the team, because that's pretty much what we're going to need. Damn near perfect Pokemon to overcompensate and get through these battle towers as effectively as possible. Now, before we get into the standard ribbons that come with this challenge, I wanted to give a little more information on something we discussed in the previous video. Remember the cringy one that was just 30 minutes of a near 30-year-old virgin talking about hexadecimal what's-it-who's-it and arbitrary code, whatever it's called? Yeah, that one. Well, if you do remember, the whole reasoning behind a lot of the extra work that went into getting this Pichu was the fact that in order to get every possible ribbon, I had to have the right corruption type and go through the whole lengthy process to have the chance of acquiring a particular set of ribbons. See, the game developers actually intended for the players to go to certain events and acquire additional ribbons. There were also ribbons only given out to winners of certain tournaments. Obviously, these ribbons were either not normally accessible or just outright never given out to anyone due to, unforeseen conflicts with events and development. Now, this would normally stop someone from getting these ribbons, and accordingly, no one in the Pokemon ribbon collecting community, yes, they do indeed exist, consider these impossible ribbons as part of the full challenge. However, if it is not glaringly obvious at this point, I am not normal. If there is any legitimate, quote-unquote, possibility of getting these ribbons without having to use an external or cheating device/software, then I consider this part of my challenge. Without getting into too much detail about how it was possible to get this ribbon, I will refer you back to my original video and additional references regarding Ace and exactly how manual internal code manipulation works. But essentially, I was able to get a shiny Pichu from an American Pokemon box that actually had the proper corruption type that result in getting the ribbon in its status, this being a very small chance inherently. But once I did this manipulation via a very long and strenuous process, he was able to get these as well as other random ribbons as a side effect and result. However, that does not mean I do not have to fulfill all the standard challenges that would normally come with doing a ribbon challenge, like beating the battle towers, the contests, etc. It does, on the other hand, eventually result in some, let's say, interesting side effects and quirks with my Pichu, like randomly deleting some ribbons because the ribbon status screen becomes over-encumbered with sprites, and now that the game did not intend to transfer that Pichu with those same sprites, you might end up losing those ribbons, maybe, hypothetically, or the Pichu is just straight up invisible when I try to send it out in battle in games like Pokemon XD. But we will burn that bridge when we get to it. With all that being said, we can get started with the contests in the Hoenn region. Now, with these and every subsequent contest, you have 5 main categories. There is the cool category, the tough category, the smart category, the cool category, and the cute category. With all of these categories come a different bracket of corresponding move sets. So if you've ever noticed when you take a look at your moves, obviously you have the basic typing like steel, dark, fire, etc. But if you actually scroll over, continue in the summary, which a lot of us, I guarantee, didn't do as kids, but you keep going, you actually see corresponding values and categories for each of these moves, where they can be categorized as what I just described. If you're not familiar with how contests typically go in this generation, as soon as you actually get on board, right, you submit your Pokemon, whatever Pokemon you want to be the one getting the ribbon. In this case, we're going to be doing the Pichu, and you pick a category for them. First, you have to start off at normal rank if you've never actually accomplished or beaten any contest before. After you beat normal rank, it goes up to super, then hyper, and then master. Each ribbon we need to acquire corresponds to every single rank, so we need to go from normal all the way to master in all 5 categories. So once you get into the contest hall, you're going to be in line with 3 other contestants who each have their own Pokemon for the category. Based on the amount and type of Pokeblocks that you used on your Pokemon, the crowd will rate you on your overall appeal, your aesthetic. This will be signified by hearts popping in the crowd. Obviously, the more hearts you get to the other contestants, the better you do. From here, we get into the second part of the contest, the actual shit show. Now, I will say this as fair warning to anyone getting into contests or perhaps tempting fate by doing one of these godforsaken ribbon challenges. But Gen 3 contests are complete ass. While normal to hyper rank isn't too bad, following a competent difficulty curve and increase in AI intelligence as you move up, the jump to master is completely asinine, a word you'll hear me use quite often throughout this challenge. Depending on what the contestants' Pokemon are, which can come out of a rather small pool of possibilities from the AI, you're either going to have a somewhat challenging time, or you're going to have your sweet cheeks absolutely spanked for the next 10 minutes. Right? The main setup here is that you have your standard 4 moves that each correspond to a category type. If you use a type that is matching the current category, you tend to get a higher score, which can slowly build the streak. Timing the streak will elicit an even higher bonus that will add up at the end of the contest. Doing a type that doesn't match, but is similar enough and close in proximity to the type, will vary in effect depending on the generation. These moves can not only elicit hearts from the crowd, but also be used to startle the other Pokemon, causing them to lose hearts or even skip their turn entirely. The main thing here is to figure out a decent enough moveset that will play into the crowd and category. It is also key to note the contestants' Pokemon, as certain ones are more predisposed to certain tactics. Now, this is mainly just RNG, so expect to be resetting a lot when you get completely matchups, especially in categories that your Pokemon do not have sufficient movesets for. These variables are all things to consider going forward with contests in the next generations, but with Gen 3, this tends to be the most notorious for its grindiness and reliance on the ineptitude of the AI. Like I said, it's really all luck once it gets to the second half. So now that we have went over the general details for contests, let's see how well our Pichu can fare. Right off the bat, you can take a look into Pichu's moveset in Gen 3, and what you'll see is that we're right from the get-go. His move pool is limited and has a notable lack of decent moves in the tough, smart, and beauty category. Sadly, these are also his lowest contest stats, so you know we're not going to have a good time. Making decent Pokeblocks is key in getting anywhere in these contests. Luckily, after doing some research, I was able to find a decent mix of not so rare berries that would create well-balanced Pokeblocks and distribute his stats accordingly. Another lifesaver are the contest scarves. You're definitely going to need these scarves, alright? There are 5 different scarves that correspond to each of the 5 categories. You get these from the Pokemon Fan Club director if you show him a Pokemon with any maxed out category. Whatever corresponding maxed out category is the scarf you get. Easiest way to do this is to just stuff 5 throwaway Zigzagoons full of Pokeblocks and each corresponding stat, like the good little whore he is, and show him to the Fan Club pimp. From there, we just have to adorn our Pichu with the appropriate scarf for each category and pray for the Lord's blessings once we get to mastering. After going through the contest, we can move on to another fan favorite, the Battle Tower, a monument to all our sins, or Game Freak sins really. Now, Battle Tower is definitely something I have a love-hate relationship with. While it is nostalgic and presents a great post-game challenge, me being the man-child that I am, with the emotional intelligence and maturity of a 6-year-old, the hilariously frustrating AI can result in bouts of anger that would deeply trouble my therapist. You can either choose the Ruby and Sapphire Battle Tower or the Emerald Battle Tower for these ribbons. Now, both are difficult to an extent, but the AI is apparently a bit dumber in the earlier titles. However, in Emerald, the open category lets any level Pokemon join, while Ruby's and Sapphire's open category is only for level 100 Pokemon. I'm going to be doing the Ruby and Sapphire Battle Tower for this challenge. The 2 ribbons you need to get consist of getting streaks of 50 wins in the level 50 and open category. Due to the Battle Tower only doing battles in streaks of 7, you'll only have to have your ribbon master in the last set of battles preceding the ribbon. Now, I'm not going to get into a long discussion of battle strategies for the tower, as there are plenty of videos that can do far better than I can. However, the main team that I did this challenge with consisted of Aladios, Metagross, and Suicune, all of which have the best natures along with meta-viable movesets. Yes, soft resetting and catching the legendaries numerous times just for a viable nature and IV combination was a bitch. The Suicune in particular was one of my favorites, as its bulky stats and rest, sleep talk, and surf combo just dominates. During the last set of battles, I just swapped out the Suicune with my Pichu, as Latios and Metagross did well enough to act as both a sweeper and consistently strong combo team that could backpack this useless baby. After getting through the Battle Tower in the contest, there isn't much left to do in Hoenn. The most standard ribbon you'll have for every generation is the Beat X Pokemon League and become the champion of X region. So with that, we made a quick run over through the Hoenn Pokemon League and absolutely murdered them with our OP team. The other ribbons mainly just came as a side effect of the other main ribbons discussed previously. The painting ribbon naturally happens after winning a Master Rank contest, and the Eevee ribbon came after I talked to the person once I Eevee trained my Pichu for the Battle Tower. Now that we've done all we can in Gen 3, we can move on to everyone's favorite gen that so desperately needs a remake already. Come on, Game Freak, we know you're listening.
Give the goblins their gold.
That's right, we're moving on to the Ore region.
Gotcha, bitch!
Now, don't worry. We will be moving on to Gen 4 soon enough, but first we have to get a couple ribbons in the GameCube installments first. Now, you can get these ribbons in either Coliseum or XD. I just happen to do it in XD because it happened to be within reach of my GameCube and Poop Bucket. Now, most ribbon challengers would say, hey, wait just a minute. You said you were going to get every possible ribbon in your challenge, but one of the 2 ribbons in this region requires you to purify a Shadow Pokemon, and your Pichu was never a Shadow Pokemon. So how is it possible to do that one? Listen here, you little bitch. I foresaw all this coming, so I made sure that one of the ribbons that occurred as a side effect of the ACE method I conducted previously would also be eliciting that very ribbon. I made sure that any ribbon that would normally be impossible for this Pichu to get was prompted by the means and standards I set as a precedence early in this challenge. So that means we only have to worry about Mount Battle. This is essentially a novice battle tower where you can save in between each battle, and the levels don't scale. There are 100 battles you have to do without changing your team. Your team is healed after each battle, and every set of 10 trainers slightly increases in level until they cap at level 70. Overall, it's a joke, and it only took me about 3 hours with the team I transferred over from Hoenn. If you do notice, though, in the video, my Pichu is actually invisible when it's sent out into battle. I can only assume this is a side effect of the ACE method, but it is what it is. Kinda interesting. And with that, we are all done with the most frustrating generation. All done. Now we can move on to the Big Boy League. Sinnoh. So, remember when I said there were some unforeseen hiccups that came as a side effect from the ACE method we talked about earlier and in the previous video? Well, as I so eloquently described before, it turns out that swapping over aspect values from your Pokemon using ACE can have some unintended effects. For example, due to this specific Pokemon's nature and respective stat manipulation required for the method to work, my Pichu actually received duplicate ribbons, on top of the impossible ribbons discussed previously, as a side effect of this method. This was due in part to the inherent nature of the method and the Pokemon, but also a previously unknown oversight in Pokeblock manipulation. Now, there was no way this could have been predicted, since Pokemon developers have a tendency to make the most inconsistent decisions with their coding and effects of transitioning into newer gens. Like I said, really invigorating and exciting stuff here, honestly. But essentially, Nerdman make bad program and other Nerdman could not compensate. So as a result, even though I had the ribbons and completed the challenges, as you can see, did every single contest, completed the battle tower, everything I needed to completely legitimately, the glitch actually caused me to lose the cool ribbons when I transferred the Pichu up to Gen 4 in Pal Park. While this isn't really an issue because my main goal was just to have the impossible ribbons and conduct every challenge with this Pichu as a video for evidence and entertainment purposes, it is still somewhat frustrating to see him technically missing ribbons he had already had. But hey, wouldn't be my Pokemon if there wasn't some goofy wrong with him, right? I mean, how many people can honestly say they have a disappearing Pokemon with disappearing ribbons? A real Houdini, am I right? I can only assume this was caused by having too many ribbons, and so when I did transfer it up to Pal Park, the game just tried to condense it, and instead of getting rid of the excess ribbons, which it did, it also naturally got rid of my cool ribbons. Doesn't really make sense. Complete load of BS, but all we can do is move forward, right? And keep going with the challenge. Getting back into the normal challenge, we're back with these ever so loved contests. Now, the same concept generally apply for these contests as well. The only difference really being is that there is a dancing section where you have to time certain inputs and match steps to the other contestants. While it can be frustrating at times, it actually gives a little more variability and lessens the monotony of the contests as compared to the ones from Gen 3. On top of that, you can actually take this chance to heighten your score, as the first round for Appeal is way harder than the third Gen one. You can actually decorate your Pokemon with items you've accumulated over your playthrough, and by doing certain random tasks throughout said playthrough. Now, a random category will pop up, and you'll need to add decorations on your Pokemon that match this category as soon as you start the contest. You'd think this would give you another chance to add points onto your score, but trust me, getting enough decorations to actually make a difference is a task in and of itself, and it usually only increases your score by a little bit. However, I would still recommend it, as you want to garner as many points as possible as early as you can. If you want decent decorations, you'll start to amass them as you progress through the ranks of the contest naturally. You can also take a stroll with your little slave babies in the same town. Make sure you have specific partners though, as certain Pokemon can pick up specific decorations you may or may not have already. I would recommend referencing a guide on Bulbapedia for any specific decorations you're looking for. Now, the pool of potential contestants and their Pokemon is a little bit bigger, but most are similarly frustrating. Just make sure you don't get your mom as a contestant during the Master Race. She will literally spank you in front of thousands of witnesses. I promise you, it's not fun. The moveset concept isn't too much different here, and I honestly thought these contests were easier than 3rd Gen. Pichu also has a bigger move pool in this gen, so that only made it easier. Once you are done with those wonderful contests, we can move on to what can be considered easily the most anxiety-inducing parts of this challenge. The 4th Gen Battle Tower ribbons. Now, the standard Battle Tower format ribbons aren't a big issue, right? You get the first 2 ribbons by simply following the same format from Gen 3. Just win 25 and then 50 battles in a row in singles and defeat the Battle Tower Tycoon. Nothing too insane or difficult here. I mainly used the same team I did from the previous gen with a nice addition to speed it up a bit, and it worked out just fine. Obviously, the AI is a little more intelligent, and there is a much larger variety of move pools and Pokemon to deal with, but generally speaking, it isn't too much to worry about. The next ribbon is the same thing, but just in doubles format. Luckily, you don't have to fight the Tower Tycoon, and these battles actually end up going a bit faster. Next on the list is a format that is far more frustrating than it is actually difficult. This is because you actually have to get through the streak, but you are paired up with an AI counterpart that is chosen by the player. You are able to recruit any of the previously partnered AI if you have completed their side storyline throughout your progress of the game. Now, they do have a decent move pool and a pretty good potential selection of Pokemon, but my god, are they not intelligent enough to consistently rely on? I mean, can you imagine the frustration of picking a partner you think can handle their own and keep up with the very same AI that is controlling them, to only have the opposing team completely focus their attacks on you, completely sweep you, and your partner is just sitting there with their Blissey, thumb in ass, just soft boiling till it dies after a 40+ win streak? Yeah, infuriating. I recommend just choosing Marley and praying for consistency. After this, you have the ribbon that requires you to do the same streak but with a partner over Wi-Fi. Essentially, you just get a second DS, because we all know you don't have friends, and you control both trainers while you run through double battles. Now, the only frustrating thing about this is that you have to deal with the completely abysmal bitrate of two DS's inputs going simultaneously. The attacks are long and boring, and you still have to pray that you don't run into the typical BS that comes with the AI and the battle tower. But now, once you get those done, like I said, generally using the same strategy as before, this is where it gets interesting. The last ribbon is actually one that is technically not able to be received under normal circumstances, of course, because it requires Wi-Fi connection with the Nintendo DS servers to conduct battles. When you win a streak of 7, you go up in rank. Do this 5 times, and you would normally get this ribbon. You're essentially battling AI that are mimicking the battles of whoever previously won in that specific Wi-Fi room in that rank. The main problem here, though, is that those NDS servers were terminated years ago. That would normally mean that this ribbon is no longer attainable. Normally. But we ain't normal here, are we? So it turns out that some mad lads were actually able to figure out how to create their own alternate DNS server that can duplicate the original Nintendo DS servers and act as a conduit in which your DS can connect to and play. All that is required is to manually change your DNS settings in your DS and either connect via an Android hotspot or older internet router. While that is all nice and dandy, the issue is that the servers are mainly unmonitored because Nintendo isn't in control of them. This means that these battle rooms are absolutely swamped with hacked and normally illegal Pokemon. This means that if you run into a team like this, which you likely will, at least once in a room of 7 potential trainers, you'll lose. Lose enough and you get deranked. Autistic screeching ensues. This is only further exacerbated by the fact that we will eventually have to run through an entire room at the highest rank before getting the ribbon, with our Pichu, at a severe handicap, while already going against completely hacked or illegal Pokemon. So essentially, we're kind of screwed here. So, to make this even remotely possible, I decided on something. Remember when I said I'd never use any external devices, cheating programs, hacks, or glitches to help me? We're not going to be, glitching. Well, I lied. Wrong. Kind of. Not really, but kind of. While I made sure that I would never use any cheats, hacks, or external devices for any part of my hunt or challenge, I did find out that there is this nifty in-game glitch that can result in certain Pokemon learning moves they would not normally be able to. While you can find much better guides on the internet, essentially, you just do some with a Ditto and a Smeargle, use Rage, something or another happens with a trainer in a doubles battle, and you eventually transfer the copied move onto the Pokemon in question. In my case, a no-guard Machamp learning Sheer Cold, an insta-kill move. While this does mean I can spam this move and it will never miss due to the no-guard ability, this strategy is still very common in the Wi-Fi rooms that we're going to be battling in. So, in order to even have a chance, I had to somewhat level the playing fields by kind of, do as my enemies do, right? Now, like I said, this is certainly and definitely not an auto-win scenario here. Like I said, not only are there plenty of trainers in these battle rooms doing the same exact strategy with hacked Machamps that are far faster than me, there are still plenty of other things that outspeed and can easily kill this Machamp. Especially, like I said, when you consider all the hacked and illegal legendaries that are littered within these rooms. Mind you, with the Machamp, I also use my typical team with Latios, Metagross, and occasionally swap out with Suicune depending on what I knew was going to be in that particular room for that rank. But generally speaking, I used a very similar setup and team that I had been using this entire time. So it wasn't just Machamp all the way through, because I can't tell you how many times he got completely screwed and one-hit killed against all of their other completely broken Pokemon. But, like I said, this is really one of the only ways to semi-reliably backpack a literal baby all the way to the last ranks. Sad thing is, I actually wasn't able to even connect to these servers with my current router and hotspot, so my wonderful girlfriend actually had to have my game and record it live while I recorded her recording and gave her instructions on how to battle each and every member through each rank, since she was actually able to connect to these servers. Usually, the rooms don't update daily, so if you do lose, you can eventually learn a consistent strategy that can counter a decent amount of times the next day. Well, we can finally take a breath of fresh air and rejoice in the fact that we're done with some of the most frustrating aspects of this challenge. Next on the list are arguably the easiest ribbons. The weekday ribbons. Nice change of pace, right? All you gotta do is go talk to this chick, give her a random phrase on each day of the week. Do this for each day and you get all 7 ribbons. Easy peasy. You also have this weird foot fetish one. Tickle your Pokemon's feet enough, make it happy, and go talk to this pervert. Bada bing bada boom, you got the weirdest ribbon in Pokemon. Obviously, you have the typical champion ribbon that comes with every gen, so go and mop the floor with the 4 goobers and their mom, and you're good to go. While you also have the chance to get the overly expensive Regal ribbons here, it is much harder to get money in this gen as compared to later gens, so I just saved those little pretties for later. After transferring them up to the best Pokemon games ever made, Fight Me, we can get the last ribbon. You know, the one where you put red in his place and cement your place as the one true king. So, we trekked up the mountain, smacked his little peepee nice and hard, and got the last ribbon for this whole gen. However, I thought it'd be a shame to not get a little treat after all the hard work we did. I know it technically isn't a ribbon, but the shiny crown is something that's really interesting to me and I've always thought was an awesome addition to the game, a nice little secret Easter egg. So I thought my little prince deserved his crown after his huge accomplishments. If you want a guide on getting the shiny crown, feel free to look it up elsewhere, because nobody got time for that. Now we can finally move on to Gen 5. Finally, so much to do in Unova. Can't wait till... Oh, wait, there are no ribbons here. Yep, that's right. They don't got here. We can go ahead and skedaddle right to Gen 6. However, I thought we would make this challenge a little more difficult and beat the Elite Four in this game too. Now, I made sure that each time we do beat the Elite Four in any region, it was always round 2, or in this case, round 2 hard mode. I thought this would at least make it interesting. It really wasn't. Now on to Gen 6. Wonderful Kalos, aka France. And beautiful Hoenn, again, aka Too Much Water. And Head. Too much head. Look at their damn heads. God, it's so hard to look at. Overall, the generations do get a bit easier, but by no means actually easy. Now, I wasn't too worried about this gen, as I thought if I could get past the impossible atrocities the previous gens had subjected me to, this baby wash game wouldn't be too hard, right? Right? Well, not really. While the contests in Oris are the biggest joke I've ever seen, so much to the point that there's really no need to even go over them. The Battle Mason is probably one of, if not the most, and I know you've heard it plenty of times, bullshit post-game events I've ever played. While the concept is nothing new, the AI is notorious for being so janky that it may as well be cheating. And I'm not even exaggerating here. Go look up reviews and discussions regarding the Battle Mason, guys. At least in the other gens, the AI adhere to the rules of the actual game. In all seriousness, you will randomly lose to AI that spam insta-kill moves and just somehow never miss. Their Quick Claws will always allow them to move first, even if it is only a 10% increase in likelihood. You will almost always miss moves because of their opponent's Bright Powder, even though the same concept applies to their items. How I know there's something odd about it is that these issues become far more prevalent as your streaks increase. It's almost as if the game knows you're doing well, so it manipulates aspects of the game to alter the advantage to the AI. And besides the BS AI, the main difference with this Battle Tower clone is that you actually have to beat one type of format before you can even move on to the next type, their Super version. You get a ribbon for both versions, but you need to get a streak of 50 in the first, then another 50 in the more difficult Super version to get the next. Now, you do only have to fight one person at a time, so that is a little nicer than the streaks of 7, but it still is super annoying with the janky AI system. Now, my main team did fairly well, but because of this completely broken AI, and the fact that I was in a rush to finish these ribbons by September so I would not have to rank back up to Master Rank in Sword and Shield for the next month, I decided to alter my team. This is where I went in with the Truant strat. If you're not familiar with Truant, it's the completely doo-doo butter ability that Slacking has that makes it unable to move every other turn. Why the heck would I want this ability, you ask? Well, that's because Durant can actually have this ability as its hidden ability if you were to get them in hordes. Okay, why does that matter? Well, I'll tell you, you nosy little. That's because Durant can learn Entrainment. Entrainment lets you make the opponent have your ability, and because Durant with a Choice Scarf is a speedy little boy, you're almost always able to screw over your opponent's lead first. From here, you can just swap out, set up with a Pokemon of your choice, and then sweep their entire team. I'd recommend Mega Kangaskhan and Speed Boost Scolipede, as the inherent BS of the AI here can occasionally interrupt your setup or negate entrainment entirely. Self-contained sweepers can more easily get swept themselves due to the issues I previously described, so this was the safest bet, at least for this gen. And obviously, this makes it difficult to swap in your Pichu for the toughest battles by the end. But with some prep using Bulbapedia and my handy dandy, now Mega Latios, we didn't have too much trouble the second time around. Next, we just had to amass some moolah to buy these Regal ribbons. As I said, it's far easier to get money in this gen than the previous one, so we head on over to Hoenn again to spam the verse recorder and beat up some rich kids until we have over 1 million Pokémon, or whatever the hell it's called. So now that we have that, the joke contest and the hellscape that was the Battle Mason being completed, the rest of the ribbons will be simple enough. Psych, you thought. Now we gotta do something called Super Training, baby! While this contest is super useful for EV training, as you just need to shoot balloons and tap on a corresponding punchy bag to elicit a heap of EVs, getting the record times and getting medals in each of the courses is definitely not the easiest task. Especially when your Ribbon Master is a baby mouse that has the attack power of, well, a baby mouse. Each species has a different type of formatted attack, with bigger and stronger Pokemon / type combinations having varying levels of speed and strength output in their shots. Typically, electric types shoot the ball fast, but they don't elicit as many points per hit. A rock type may shoot slower, but hit harder, etc. This is at least what I noticed, but hey, I'm also no expert. I guarantee there's a helpful guide for each species and ball effectiveness on the internet. There's always a guide on the internet. On top of this, EVs do play into effect, as higher EVs in the corresponding course elicit higher scores on average, but only mildly. Now, Pichu was definitely not easy to get this ribbon done, but after a few hours of practice, we were able to squeeze out the records we needed for the ribbon. But man, those tentacles. From there, we just had to stuff and fluff and luff on our Pichu in Amai, till it had enough, and it could get the pretty little
Give me the ribbon.
Ami ribbon, whatever the hell it's called. Lastly, we went on over to the E4 for the 100th time and spanked them, getting our last ribbon for this gen. Moving on to Gen 7, we visit the wonderful islands of Alola. Now, I was kind of worried having to do another Battle Tower template that I had heard had even better AI, where they can actually Mega Evolve on top of that. And god, what the hell is Battle Royale? I was scared, y'all. Luckily though, the Battle Tree, while having better AI and Mega capabilities, was actually not as bad as the Mason. This may be my own experience here, but from what I can gather, the BS AI strats that were so common in higher streaks in the Mason were definitely tempered down in the Tree. So while I had to deal with smarter and overall better opponents, the anxiety of getting completely swamped by some uncontrollable variable was not really there. The concepts for the tree are the same as the Mason, with 20 wins required in the standard format and 50 more in the super version, only fighting one person at a time. I decided to swap out my Kanga and Scully with a self-contained sweeper, in my case a Mega Salamence, and a good support that could hold its own against Truant and Dragon counters, in this case my Metagross. And after losing a handful of times due to me paying too much attention to Chris Hansen documentaries and not paying enough attention to the actual game, we were able to secure the win and spank Red for a third time. Moving on to the Battle Royale, which I thought was going to be far more difficult than it actually was. All we had to do was use the already OP Pokemon we trained and transferred up over the generations, and completely stomp each opponent's Pokemon on every corner of the square. Now this may seem like a typical battle, but the battle format for here is a little different. If you're not familiar, the Battle Royale has 4 total Pokemon fighting all at once. Each opponent has 3 Pokemon, and you need to be the person who is knocked out the most while having lost the least. Simple enough, right? Well, it mainly is. You just have to learn to predict the AI's movement and take out the Pokemon you believe is most vulnerable, taking into consideration yours and your opponent's speed that may be targeting the same one. Once you get through the Master Rank of this, you get the last ribbon for this gen. Except for the Champion ribbon, of course. But come on, we all knew that one is a breeze. So let's get that one and move on to the final gen. Like I stated previously, my main concern was getting all this done in time for the Rank Master ribbon in this gen. If you're not aware, your online rank actually deranks every month, so after preemptively getting to Master Ball rank in Sword and Shield at the beginning of September, I wanted to make sure I got everything done by this month so I wouldn't have to go through the shittery that is online in this generation. And man, is it While you are able to use codes to download preset teams from your favorite PokeTuber and try to spam their strats, that will only get you so far. Especially considering that you need to have your own team that you can put your Ribbon Master on and actually win a match in the toughest rank. So, I had to go through a crash course in not sucking at Pokemon battles to get this rank in a timely manner. Luckily, I had a very good teacher who helped me with a fun and reliable counter to everyone's stereotypical meta set. Yes, we get it, Dracovish and Fishious Rend is broken. Yes, we get it, Snarl is also a broken move. Yes, we get it, Follow Me and Weakness Policy setup teams are legal. Yes, we get it, Libero is a good ability. That doesn't make it fun to play. Get your own ideas, sheeple. Mind you, this was all mostly done before the ban of most of these broken Mon, so this process was super fun, let me tell you. And let me just say on top of that, this is probably the only remotely difficult ribbon in this whole gen. After we got this, the Battle Tower in this gen is a bigger joke than the contest in Oris. I used my same meta team we used to get Master Ball rank and just swept Leon and his dumb Zard like 5 times till we got to the max rank there as well. The last champion ribbon was a breeze, as you can imagine, and I loved my Pichu till its head almost exploded, netting us the last ribbons for this whole challenge. Well, we finally did it. Ran through the whole gauntlet, and what do we have to show for it? A bedazzled mouse baby. But you know what? It's all about the journey, not the destination, right? I'm pretty sure that's how the phrase that mobs put on their wall goes, at least. Overall, this was probably the most mind-numbing, longest, and most stressful challenge in a video game I've ever put myself through. All the different areas of expertise that I had to practice in really did put this whole thing over the edge. But I honestly think it was all worth it. This has been something years in the making, and I'm so glad it was something I could share with all of y'all. I don't plan on doing anything like this again anytime soon, but I'm glad that I did something like this at least once. Now, was my goal accomplished? Was this really the rarest Pokemon ever? I mean, it's really up for debate. Was this the most ridiculous or most difficult Pokemon to do? Well, that's also really up for debate, but it's definitely the most difficult one I could think of. While there were some complications along the way, which is to be expected with something of this magnitude, I hope I at least provided y'all with as much comprehensive knowledge and meager entertainment I can muster through it all. But with all that being said, I'm glad y'all could stick through for the entire ride, and I hope to see you in the next video.